Good morning, everybody. This is Mr. E with another therapy session. Of course, I've got my Mr. E coffee mug, as I always do when I do these, because, when you get as old and ugly as I am and you have kids, you pretty much need coffee to wake yourself up in the morning. So having said that, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about a third foundational topic, which today's topic shouldn't take as long, but it is very important. Because if you can understand today's topic, it makes the other two foundational sessions that we did make a little bit more sense. In addition, if you happen to be a therapist or a social worker, someone especially working with children, oftentimes they will have certain notions about life, like, well, it should be fair. This is not fair, in a certain situation, particularly with conflicts with other people. They get into a position where a lot of times kids, they assume things are fair or should be fair, and they don't understand why they need to follow rules or why they need to de-escalate conflicts. And so today's foundational session, the topic is life equals time. And so what I did was, of course, I included a quote that is related to this. The quote says, "Time is free, but it's priceless. You can't own it, but you can use it. You can't keep it, but you can spend it. Once you've lost it, you can never get it back." I agree with this 100%. And in fact, that is exactly today's topic. Of course, you spend your time, but one thing people don't recognize, particularly clients, is that they're spending their life when they waste their time or when they make a bad decision. And so this is our last foundational session to go along with, when we were talking about freedom of action and responsibility, as well as the relationship between thinking, feelings, and behavior. This is sort of in the middle and kind of puts it together so that we can move on to a more specific topic as we move up that pyramid I've shown you in the past two videos. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So this is the pyramid I was talking about. If you look at the bottom, the topics that are highlighted in blue are the ones we've already done. Those were our first two sessions, our foundational topics. The two in the middle I'm combining together. That's in the green, and that's what we're talking about today. And of course, keep in mind that the ultimate goal here at the top of the pyramid, the wording that's highlighted in yellow, is to achieve goals. And so if you're working with clients, that's the number one thing you're trying to do. But to me, the reason I'm doing the videos this way is because if you can understand the foundation, which everything else sits on, it not only does it make your job as a therapist, if you happen to be a therapist, it makes it easier, because once you teach these things, you can then refer to it and everything fits into it. It's like a puzzle. But the other thing is, as a person, if you were a person watching this and you need help, if you have substance abuse issues, anger management issues, conflict with family, whatever the case is, if you understand these foundational topics, it makes everything else much easier to understand and to apply later, which really is the point of therapy. You have to be able to apply it. So again, your life equals your time. And so, for instance, if I spend an hour of my time playing a video game, then that's an hour of my life that I can't get back. Now, maybe I wanted to do that, and that's fine, no problem there. But if you spend an hour of your time doing something, then you're also spending your life. I mean, because you live your life through time, at least as far as we're concerned. I mean, who knows if time is even a real thing? But as far as how human beings perceive it, it is, and we live life through that time. Now, if you look at point one there, if I make a bad decision, and let's say I end up going to prison for 2 years, that's not just 2 years of time I did, that's 2 years of my life. And during that time, during that 2 years, I could have been free on the outside. I could have not been in prison. I could have been doing what I wanted to do, whether that's going to parties, whether that's vacations, spending, being with my family, whatever it is I wanted to do, that freedom. If we go back to our second session talking about freedom and responsibility, if I make a bad decision and let's say I go to prison, that's a huge loss of freedom, but a large increase in negative consequences and ultimately responsibility. And so the point is, though, that's 2 years of my life that I cannot get back. So, if I get out of prison and I die in a car wreck on the way home, first of all, that probably wouldn't have happened if I wasn't coming back from prison at that same time at that moment. But more to the point, I just lost 2 years of my life. I just wasted it. And so essentially, when you make decisions, the payment that I talk about on here, when I talk about negative consequences, The ultimate payment that you're really paying is your life, because you're taking whatever time you waste or whatever time you spend being punished. That's actually your life. So you might as well, instead of spending money, so to speak, you're spending your life when you make decisions. So when you make good decisions, you hopefully save time and thus save your life, and you're able to actually enjoy your freedom more. Point number two, of course, no one knows when they're going to die. You don't know how much time you have left on this planet. I mean, I could die today. I could die tomorrow. I might die when I'm 80. I have no idea. But the more time you waste, that's time you could have spent doing something you wanted to do, something that made you happy, or something that maximized your freedom to live your life the way you wanted to. Point number three, making decisions leads to actions and behaviors that you act out through time. So for instance, this morning when my alarm clock went off, I had a decision to make, either get up or not get up. And then I got up, and then I ate breakfast. I didn't have to, but I chose to. Then I read a little bit on the front porch, and now I'm drinking some coffee and making a video. But the point is, I'm living life through time, and every second of the day, there's events occurring. I'm making decisions. If you remember from the first session, events are just things that happen. They're random. They're not about me, but they happen. So what I'm saying is, you live life through time, and at each point you may be making a decision, and that decision then comes with consequences. And that's really what we're talking about today, is how much time are we going to waste or save? Point number four, informed decisions, which means decisions you've thought about and you've weighed the consequences. Typically, they lead to maximizing the amount of time you have to enjoy your freedom, or what we might call positive consequences. So when you make informed decisions, you're actually saving time and therefore saving your life. So even when you make good decisions, you still have to spend time. You still have to spend something. There's going to be a payment. What you're trying to do is minimize it. Whereas impulsive decisions do the opposite. So impulsive decisions tend to waste your time, waste your life, and lead to greater negatives, which is what we're trying to avoid, especially if you're working with clients, and particularly what you might call difficult populations, such as released offenders, individuals who maybe they're addicted to a substance and they don't really want help yet, but they're mandated to treatment, or teenagers with behavioral issues that are mandated to treatment. The reason this lesson is so important is because you're trying to engage them on the level of, what do you want as a person, even if it's something that you don't agree with therapeutically, even if it's not therapeutic. If they say, well, I just want to play my video games all day. Okay, well, how do we get there then? We have to be able to maximize your freedom so that you have time to do that while staying out of trouble. And so ultimately, even though that may be a very non-therapeutic goal, it's just a personal goal, we can make it kind of meet at the top. So like if this is their goal, personal goal, and here's the therapeutic goal, we can make it meet at the top eventually if you teach this foundation and apply it. Point number five, just because you don't have an idea of how long you live, it's you don't know how, when you're going to pass away. It's a good idea to try to make the most informed decisions you can, so that again, you maximize your time to do what you want to do as an individual. And again, if you're a therapist, you want to emphasize this. Now, as far as how life equals time, today's topic, how it relates to freedom and responsibility, and then of course the triangle that we've talked about before, the thinking, feelings, and behavior. A couple of points here. Point number one, when you choose what I call the freedom path, which is just doing what you want, it generally leads to a decrease in freedom over time, but an increase in responsibility because you didn't take care of your responsibilities, as well as negative consequences, meaning that you pretty much spend your life or your time paying out the negative consequences. So essentially, you're paying with your life when you make a bad decision or an impulsive decision. So an example would be, let's say somebody calls you a name and you get really mad about it and you decide to get in a fight, and you punch somebody. So that would be aggression, which is typically impulsive. It's just an urge. So you get mad, you punch somebody. I want to say that fight lasts a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes. You feel good. You beat him up. You taught him a lesson. He'll never call you that name again, right? Well, the problem is, let's say you get, at my age, for instance, let's say I get arrested, and let's say I go to jail for a year. Let's say I have to pay restitution, their medical bills. If I get out, let's say I'm on probation now, I have to take anger management classes. But even just looking at the year in jail, if that's what it was, that's a year of my time and my life that I can't get back. So basically, I gained 5 minutes of freedom to feel good, to feel like a big man, to punch him in the face and do what I wanted. But in order to earn that 5 minutes, I had to pay out a year of my life, a year of negative consequences, and a lot more increased responsibility that I didn't have before. So before I got in the fight, there was no probation, there was no anger management classes, there was no paying medical bills. It wasn't there until I took the action. So point number two, if I choose the responsibility path, which is doing what you have to do or you need to do, even if you don't want to, and I mean, typically you don't want to do whatever it is that's responsible. I mean, who does? For instance, I woke up today, and of course I didn't want to. It was the responsible thing to do, but I didn't want to. Now, having said that, though, when you choose the responsibility path, as I said in session 2, it generally leads to a decrease in responsibility over time in the long term, because you've taken care of your responsibility. So if I wake up and go to work, I took care of that responsibility. Now that responsibility is done for the day, and I made my money. But if I don't, then my work piles up. Eventually I get fired. Maybe I can't pay my bills. You get the point I'm making. Now, in this case, let's say somebody calls you a dirty name. You get a little irritated, but you just decide to walk away. You just say, okay, man, whatever. And you just walk away from it. Now, even though that's not what you want to do, because in all fairness, you should be able to call him a name back, or you should be able to punch him in the face, because that's the fair thing to do. But as we're going to learn, life is not fair. But before we get to that, though, more to the point, when you walk away, even though it sucks at that time, because maybe for 5 or 10 minutes, maybe even an hour, you're mad, maybe the guy, taunts you as you walk away, and it's really, it hurts your ego, and it just pisses you off. But let's say you pay out an hour of walking away, kind of being humiliated. He's running his mouth, but then you just walk away. You go home, you're mad for a while. Let's say after an hour, it kind of goes away. That's the payment you made. You had to pay out an hour of your life in order to earn, however, the year that you would have been in jail. Now you're not. So you have a year of freedom on the outside to do what you want to do. So in other words, even though you had to pay out an hour of your life and your time, you end up earning far more in the long term. Excuse me, guys. And so that's kind of the point, is that when you make an informed decision, when you pick the responsibility path, it does suck at first. It really does, because you have to do things you don't want to do, that are unfair, that you don't feel like doing. However, in the long term, you earn a lot more from it. Just like when you go to work, you put the time in, then you get the paycheck. And hopefully, if you're smart enough to invest your money and do what you got to do, maybe you can retire and you have plenty of money to live on. And so even though you put all that time in, now you can enjoy yourself. It's kind of the same way with every decision you make. Point number 3 here, if you choose the freedom path, it's typically due to irrational, or what I call opinion-based thinking, which I mentioned in session 1, which we will discuss more probably in the next video if that's the topic I choose. But basically, irrational opinion-based thinking, which is just how you feel about something, it typically leads to what you call irrational behavior, which is essentially behavior that makes no sense given whatever the actual problem is. And so when you take an irrational behavior, not only does it not increase the chance of fixing the problem, a lot of times it's not even related to the problem at all. And so, as I have on here on the screen, chasing your freedom equals irrational thinking, leads to irrational behavior, which of course then leads to negative consequences and increased responsibility. So when you chase your freedom, when you make the decision to do that, you ironically lose that freedom. So an example would be, again, like I said, I believe it was in session 1, if your car won't start and you go, man, I hate this car, you get angry, and maybe you just slam the door, you go in and decide to get drunk all day instead. Don't even want to fool with it. Well, that's taking your freedom. That's doing something that you can do. You feel like doing it, so you do it. So let's say you spend 5 hours getting drunk instead of actually trying to fix your car. Well, you gain that 5 hours of freedom, right? But your car still has to be fixed. So you essentially waste 5 hours doing nothing. Whereas, if you were smart, you go fix your car, you go to work, you do what you got to do, then you come home, and then if you feel like getting drunk on the weekend, well, you do it. But whatever. But your car's fixed. You can do what you got to do. Whereas in this scenario, if you don't fix your car, you go get drunk, maybe you needed to work, you don't tell your boss, you get written up, you get fired. You get the point I'm making here, that irrational thinking led to irrational behavior, and ultimately you just wasted your life and your time. Now, point 4, however, if you choose the responsibility path, it's typically due to rational, what I call fact-based thinking. It's based on factually what is the problem. Well, in this case, it would be the car is not starting. That's the facts on the ground. It's just the car won't start. And then whatever the problem is causing it, maybe it's the battery. I don't know, whatever it is. But the problem is not your opinion. So if I say, I hate this car, it's a piece of crap, this always happens to me, I'm unlucky. None of that. That's just your opinion of the situation and your opinion of the car. It's not the actual problem. So like I said in session one, your problems are now going to beget more problems. It's like rabbits. They're just going to breed. So in point three, you just create more problems. You're getting drunk. Maybe you lose your job. You're wasting your time and your car won't start. Point four, though, when you choose the responsibility path, even though it sucks at first because you have to stay calm, you check out, you get under the hood, try to figure out what's wrong. And then you ultimately either spend money to have someone fix it or you fix it. Once you take care of that responsibility, it's gone. And then you earn the freedom to use that car, for however long before it breaks down again. So, let's say it's just the battery. You put the battery in. Let's say it's another year and a half before you have a problem with that car. Well, then you just gained a year and a half to use that car, do what you need to do with it. Maybe you spent 3 hours fixing it or 2 hours fixing it. So that's the payment. And it sucks to have to do that. But when you do that, you earn more on the back end. And so again, if you're looking at this, you don't waste that 5 hours. You spend it wisely fixing your car, and then you can do what you want to do or need to do with the car. So some general points about life. Your life equals your time. You live your life through time. So at any moment, there's events happening. So alarm clock goes off. That's an event. I get up. I make my coffee. That's an event. I make breakfast. That's an event. A fly lands on my nose. That's an event. Somebody knocks on my door. My phone rings. All of these things are events. Like I said before, they are typically random and they're not about you, which again is a very important point. Things happen and then you start to think about it. And that thinking is oftentimes an opinion. That opinion then leads to how you're going to feel about that event very quickly. And then you're going to have an action, a behavior, which typically is a function of a decision that you make. I try to frame this with clients very simply. The reason I do the foundational stuff is so I can relate to it every time they make a decision. So when you make a decision, it comes down really to two paths: freedom or responsibility, doing what you want or doing what you need to or have to. So for instance, if a client cusses a teacher, because maybe the teacher said something smart to them, maybe they were being mean to them or whatever, and that's their opinion, that they hate the teacher and the teacher's mean. That's their opinion. And then they get mad and then maybe they cuss the teacher. Well, in a therapy session, I would say, okay, so what have I told you before about freedom and responsibility? So I'd have the kids sort of explain it. Then if I had like a whiteboard, for instance, I'd put it on there and say, okay, we had two paths to choose from. You cussed the teacher, that was the freedom path. If you just said, okay, Miss Smith, I apologize, and just walked away, that's the responsibility path. Now, nobody wants to do the second path. I mean, who would want to be, if the teacher's being mean to you, who would want to be humble, apologize, walk away, especially if it's not your fault? Well, nobody would want to do that. Mr. E wouldn't want to do that. But that's not the point. Life is not fair, as we're about to get to. But the point is, you maximize your freedom by being responsible, even though you have to make that negative payment on the front end by not doing what you want. It's far better than just doing what you want and taking it at first and then getting in trouble. Okay, because then you lose a lot of freedom. So basically, that's the next point here. I'm not necessarily going to repeat it, but basically it comes down to this right here: patience versus being impatient, instant gratification versus delayed gratification. And when I do therapy, I emphasize the importance of being patient and delaying gratification for the purpose of the client being able to do what they want to without getting in trouble. And so when I'm dealing especially with children with behavioral issues, that's really the best way to explain to them why they should follow rules or why they should de-escalate conflict instead of escalating it. When your mom yells at you, why should you not yell? Because on the surface, that's not fair. If somebody yells at me, I should be able to yell back. But again, you earn and gain more from de-escalating, even though kids don't understand this. This is why I explain it this way. This is where these foundational sessions have come from. But you can even apply this information to, say, substance abuse, for instance, or of course, anger management groups. But, with substance abuse, someone wants instant gratification. They make that decision to get high or get drunk or whatever they're doing. And even though as a therapist, it's not my job to judge them, that if that's what they choose to do, that's what they choose to do. But when let's say they're in a session and they say, well, Mr. Eric, I slipped up and I used some Percocet yesterday, and I'm afraid I'm afraid my probation officer is going to find out. Well, okay, well, let's look at it from this way then. You took your freedom path, you took your Percocet, but here's what we could have done. And so going forward, you may not want to not get high, but in the long run, you're going to gain a lot more freedom, especially once you're off probation, versus just doing what you want right now. And then you lose that freedom if you get caught and go back to jail. So this foundational information in sessions 1, 2, and now this one, this is why I do it, because again, you can apply this to anything. Now, there's 3 points at the bottom that are highlighted in yellow. Number 1, life is about the word no, which I will explain in a minute. Life is not fair. In fact, it is fundamentally unfair. And then the third point, life is about messing up. That's it. As humans, we make mistakes. Now, the first point, the word no. So here's the way I explain this to clients, particularly teenagers, okay? Because little kids don't really understand this, but teenagers can. So when you're first born, as I said in session 2, when I showed you that graph, there is, you don't have any freedom as a newborn baby, but you also have no responsibility. And so as you get older, as you move into toddler years and young childhood years, like school age years, your freedom goes up slowly and your responsibility goes up at the same rate. And of course, your consequences for your actions as well. And the whole point is, during that time, your parents tell you no, whether it's a toddler trying to touch a knife and you say no, or, and maybe you smack their hand or whatever you're doing. The point of saying no is not to control them, it's to keep them safe. I mean, presumably, I would say the vast majority of parents, if you tell a toddler, no, don't touch that knife, don't run with scissors. The point is not to control the kid, although from the kid's standpoint, that's what they think. The kid's like, I want to do what I want to do, so they feel like they're being controlled when you say you need to take a nap, or no, you can't, eat a fourth cupcake. The adult is trying to protect them with the word no, because the kid cannot protect themselves. They have no idea how to do that. And the point of being a parent is to create an independent adult one day. Like I said, independence, you have to have freedom and responsibility, not just freedom. So point 2, as you become an adolescent and a young adult, you have to learn. The whole point of that, the whole point of growing up, is to learn how to tell yourself no. And so if you can't control yourself, you have no self-control. If you can't make good, informed decisions, you're probably not going to live very long, first of all. But second of all, you're going to have a lot of negative consequences as an adult, especially somebody my age. I mean, you're going to be in jail very quickly if you just do whatever you want. I mean, if I say, well, I'm just going to rob Walmart because I feel like taking this laptop, and then I'm going to go smoke me some crack. I mean, I can do those things, but how long am I going to be free to do them? I mean, not long, And so I have to be able to tell myself no, but where did that come from? Well, someone had to teach me how by telling me no first. Point 3, once you're on your own, once you're an adult, not only do you tell yourself no, but then if you have children of your own, you become the one saying no to someone else in order to protect them. And so basically the circle of life, so to speak, is essentially, you're born, someone tells you no for a while, you eventually learn how to tell yourself no, and then you become the one saying no. This is why people become their parents. I mean, this is why people say the same stuff their parents said once they get older. So it's kind of like, if you think about the Lion King for a minute, and I don't want to say too much because, of course, I don't want to violate any copyright or anything. But, to me, that's kind of what that movie's about. It's about life, and it's about the word no to an extent. I mean, because, the young lion, Simba, is told not to do something. Of course, he does it because he's a kid, and that's unfair, and I should be able to do what I want to do, and he's curious. So he goes and does it. And of course, the dad dies and all this bad stuff happens. And then he has to learn how to control himself and get back to his, his meaning in life, his purpose in life. And then presumably, at the end of the movie, he has a kid, and then he'll be the one saying no to that little cub, right? So, the Lion King's interesting if you really look at it from that more of a philosophical standpoint. Next point, life is not fair. It never has been fair. It never will be fair. If you are an adult, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're an adult and you think life is fair, you're not grown up then. Now, that sounds harsh and that sounds mean, but it's true. This is the main point, especially with children and adolescents, that has to be addressed, because I promise you, every single day I work with adolescents, I hear the same thing. Well, that's not fair, Mr. Eric. Well, why should I have to do that? Well, somebody yells at me, I'm gonna hit them upside the jaw, man. That's not fair. Well, life's not fair. So you have to explain this right off the bat. This is one of those fundamental things you have to explain. I don't care how you do it, but I'll give you an example. Okay. So point number two, I didn't type all of this out. I'm just going to say it. You can use, of course, any analogy or metaphor that I use, you guys can use this if you're a therapist or a social worker. It doesn't matter to me. Okay. But nature is a good example of this. you know, I'm sure you guys have watched like the Discovery Channel before, where they've had these documentaries, about lions on the savannah, somewhere in Tanzania or wherever they're at. So, of course, I've watched one of these before. It was when I was younger, and I remember one in particular that stuck with me. It was I can't remember exactly where in Africa it was, but the film crew had went out to sort of follow a pride of lions, and so you had this pride. It was several females, a male, some cubs, and they were out on the savannah, and there had been a drought for like 3 or 4 months, so there was this large lake where all the animals, the hippos, the antelope, the zebra, the lions, they all came and they drank water, and that's the watering hole. Well, of course, it hadn't rained in 3 or 4 months, so it was drying up pretty bad. And so the camera crew noticed, the animals were becoming increasingly agitated, they were increasingly aggressive. And of course, what you noticed in this documentary was that the strongest animals took the water. Of course, they killed the weaker animals. If a lion was there and an antelope, all of a sudden here comes the lion, pouncing on them. But the point is, the lions, the crocodiles, the hippos, the strong animals, they took that water. They didn't save water for the weak animals. They didn't save water for the little babies, the cubs and the calves. They didn't care. And of course they're animals. So you might say, well, Mr. Eric, that's different than humans. That's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is nature is fundamentally unfair itself. It just is. Okay. If nature's unfair, that means life is unfair. So out on the savannah, it's not like a grown male lion is going to step aside and say, oh, little baby zebra, come over here and drink my water. That would be fair. Every animal should get an equal share of the water, right? That would be fair, but that's not how nature works. Whoever's strongest takes it. Now, I'm not saying humans have to live that way, but what I am saying is biology or nature informs psychology, which informs society. So human society is informed by our individual psychology, which as a group is informed by our biology, our genetics. And so since life is not fair, society's not fair. That's just the way it is. And so the way I see it as a human being, what I try to teach my clients is how to use unfair to their advantage. Okay. So I'll give you an example. If you're talking about the teacher's pet, like let's say I have a client and they go, well, it's not fair, Mr. Eric, because I have somebody in class that always talks just like I always talk, but the teacher doesn't like me, but the teacher likes little Darren. And so that's not fair that we do the same thing, but I always get in trouble and little Darren doesn't. Well, okay. So what's going on is little Darren has a positive reputation with the teacher, and the kid I'm working with has a negative reputation, probably due to something that little Darren did in the past that created a positive reputation with the teacher, versus the kid I'm working with that did something like cuss the teacher that created a negative reputation. So even though the kid says, well, that's unfair, they're the teacher's pets, they get away with all this stuff. My question to the kid is, how can we reverse your reputation where you can use the unfair to your advantage? So instead of little Darren being the favorite, how can you become the favorite? And of course, in order to do that, you may have to do things you don't want to do initially, like be humble, apologize, be assertive, de-escalate conflict with the teacher, be kind to the teacher. And even though you may not even like the teacher, you may think they're just, whatever, you may hate them, but that's not the point. Maybe you pretend to like them. You take action, you do whatever you do, and maybe eventually your reputation becomes positive. And then of course there will be another kid in the class, they start to act up. And as I tell my kids, if you imagine a spotlight, the other kid acting up, the spotlight will go on that kid, right? If you think about the Lord of the Rings for a minute, the Eye of Sauron or whatever, when you make a scene, boom, the eye goes over here, right? And then you can sneak around the other side, like the Hobbit did, right? That's sort of what I'm talking about. So if you're smart enough, you can use, unfair to your advantage. I mean, I've had to do this before from a customer service standpoint, even in my job, where maybe I go to a school and maybe the front desk lady, the secretary, whoever it is, the receptionist, maybe they're very rude to me. I've had that happen before. They're very, very rude. They don't want me coming in there. They don't want me interrupting class to get a child out for therapy. And I've had a situation where someone was very rude to me before, actually 2 or 3 times in a row. And I just stayed humble. And I said, well, ma'am, I'm just here to do my job. I'm sorry. I apologize. I stayed very assertive, stayed very humble. And eventually, when I finally met with the principal, I told the principal, your front desk lady is very rude, and I described what happened. And what happened eventually was she got in trouble. And then she was very kind to me after that. So in other words, I got what I wanted by being patient, by delaying gratification. Whereas if this lady who was rude to me, if I had just walked in there and when she was rude to me, I was rude, or if she yelled at me, I yelled at her, then I would have gotten kicked out of that school. I would have never been able to go back there. I wouldn't have been able to do my job. I probably would have been fired, even though she started it, even though she was being rude, not me. If I do the fair thing and yell at her, I would have gotten in trouble, not her. And in fact, nothing would have happened to her. I would have lost my job, lost my ability to ever go in that school, wouldn't have been able to see that kid. I would have gotten in a lot of trouble just by doing the fair thing. Even though I didn't start it, it's fair for me to return it in kind, right? The problem is life is unfair. So sometimes, and this is where it's difficult to understand, sometimes doing the unfair thing is the best thing to do. And I'll get to that in a minute. Point number 4, kids, especially when they hit about 12 or 13, they have a couple of delusions that start to happen. The first one is, when I turn 18, I can do whatever I want to do. Of course, I've already addressed that in session 2. That's completely false. But the other delusion is the fair delusion. Everything should be, fair. And I think this is what really contributes to teenage rebellion and delinquent behavior in adolescence. This desire for everything to be fair. If you can smoke cigarettes, why can't I smoke cigarettes? So that's the example at the bottom of the page here. I've had kids tell me that before. You have a 15-year-old and they say, well, my mom smokes 2 packs a day. I should be able to smoke. She can smoke. Why can she smoke and I can't smoke? Well, besides the fact that just arbitrarily it's illegal for a minor to smoke, which, somebody just came up with those numbers, but still besides the fact that it's illegal, keep in mind, kids don't care that it's illegal. They care nothing about that. So you can mention it, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is, if you go back to session 2 about freedom and responsibility, the problem is they don't have the responsibility in order to maintain that freedom. In other words, kids unless they work, they don't really have a source of income. So a 15-year-old's probably not working. So who's paying for the cigarettes? Well, what, mom's going to pay for your cigarettes? Well, what happens if you, and of course, this probably wouldn't happen to a 15-year-old, but what if you get throat cancer for some reason? Well, who's going to pay the hospital bill? You or mom? Well, obviously mom. So the way that I engage a kid this way is not only to explain that life is not fair on the front end, but then specifically with this situation, I would say, well, are you man enough or woman enough, or however you want to put it, to pay the consequences of your actions? Like if you get in trouble, are you willing to go to court? Are you willing to have to do counseling? Are you willing to, catch a charge, first of all? Second of all, are you responsible enough to actually pay for these cigarettes and to pay the price if you get sick from them? And if the kid says no, well, then you're not man enough or woman enough for the freedom. That's the answer to your question. Mom pays for her cigarettes. She has health insurance. She'll pay the consequences of it in order to have that freedom. So again, in general, more unfair an action or a thing seems to be, the more it actually benefits you in the long run. Example, when I went into that school and the receptionist was rude to me, the most unfair thing I could do for myself was just to hold my tongue, be respectful, be humble, and just put up with it like I did. And when I did that, I ended up gaining in the long run, because not only did I not lose my job, not only did I have a good reputation at that school, not only was I able to go in there, not only for that kid, but for future clients that I had in that school, but I was also able to get her in trouble, and then she was nice to me. And so if you think about it from the cognitive standpoint, the cognitive triangle standpoint, the event was she was rude to me. She said something rude. That's factually true. She said something rude. But then my opinion would have been, oh, she's rude, she's mean, whatever. But instead of getting angry, I decided to, okay, I'm going to play the long game. I'll just get her in trouble later, and then I'll get what I want. So see, the event, her being rude, was the actual problem, not my opinion of her. If I said, well, she's a B word and she's a whatever, that's an opinion. That's not the problem. The problem was she was being rude, and I wanted her to stop. And so the question is, how do you fix it? Well, I fixed it. I fixed it by being calm, being respectful, waiting, biding my time. And then eventually I talked to the principal. She got her butt in trouble, and then she never spoke to me that way again. And then I gained all the benefits of that. See, so I spent my life and my time wisely, but I did it by using the unfairness of life to gain what I wanted. So it was unfair, but I got what I wanted in the long run. Related to this is if you do a good job at work and you build up a good reputation, maybe you hate your boss, maybe you can't even stand your boss, but you always play it cool, calm, collected. You don't let your boss know that. You work your butt off. You exceed expectations. Well, eventually you'll get rewarded for that in the long run by doing the unfair thing. So oftentimes the unfair thing is the smartest decision. It actually benefits you. So in other words, I try to teach clients how to use unfair, especially the concept of reputation, to their advantage, because let's be honest, reputation really isn't fair. I mean, I can do 99 things right and have a wonderful reputation, but the minute I mess up one time out of 100, one time, my reputation's ruined completely. So I can do 99 wonderful things. I can heal people. I can do miracles. But the one time I mess up, it's like you're condemned. Okay, your reputation's negative now. And then you have to work your butt off to get it back up. So reputation fundamentally is not fair, because the basis of reputation is someone's opinion. Okay, so again, life is not fair. That affects psychology, opinions, thinking. That's why irrational thinking exists in the first place. That's the whole reason. Instinct. And so again, nature is not fair, so neither is life fundamentally. So anyway, the next point, life is about messing up. So that's all life is. You're born, you do something, you make decisions, you mess up, and you learn from it. The thing is, if you were already perfect, if you were born perfect, there would be no reason to live. First of all, there would be no reason to learn anything, because you're perfect. You already know everything. And so therefore, there would really be no point in living life through time. So again, you live your life through time, events happen, you make decisions. More than likely, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, especially when you're a kid. That's the whole point. But hopefully what you do is, as you learn, you don't repeat those mistakes, but you gain what we call wisdom. This is why older people are considered wise. It's not that they're not more intelligent than anyone else. For instance, I'm 35 and I think I have a little bit of wisdom, but I'm not smarter than my 15-year-old clients. Some of them probably smarter than me. That's not the point though. I know more than them because I've messed up more than them. I've screwed up more. So because I've screwed up more, I know more from that end. It's not that I know more stuff, like incremental pieces of information. Like I know 90 things and they know 10. That's not the point. It's that I've been there and done that. I've made my mistakes. And so when you're dealing with the kid or an adolescent, the problem is they don't understand time like you or I do. They don't think like you or I do. When I eventually do my parenting, as we get into more specific topics, I'll eventually touch on parenting and child development. And one of the things is kids are so literal, especially as teenagers, like early school age and teenagers, that to them, everything should be fair. Everything's black or white, option one or option two. If they don't get to do something, it'll never happen. All of this is irrational. And I'll explain this again, more than likely in session 4. But the thing is, they when you tell them, look, I did this at your age, and this is why you shouldn't do it, they really don't understand that very well. They think, well, it won't happen to me. I'm smart enough. I'll get away with it. I'm not going to get caught. So it's very hard to get around the fair thing, the fair delusion, and the delusion that it won't happen to them. They just, but anyway, this is why the foundational topics exist. If you can really understand it yourself and teach it well, then you can refer to it. And even if the kid doesn't understand it, as they make mistakes, you can then say, okay, I told you so. Let's go through the model again. You'll see where you messed up. Here's what we need to do different next time in order to help you reach your goals so that you stay out of trouble, so you maximize your freedom. So there's nothing wrong with making a mistake at all. Okay, the key to it is to learn from it. So for instance, if I'm teaching like a substance abuse class and a client comes in and says, Mr. Eric, I did some meth yesterday. I messed up. And sometimes they in the past, when I would teach groups, they would be worried I would be mad at them. And I'm like, no, look, I'm not mad at you at all. Okay. I wish you hadn't done it, but let's just learn from it. So let's run through it. What was your trigger? What were you thinking? Why did you make that decision? What were the positives and negatives? And once we go through all that, okay, the cognitive triangle and the consequences, It's like, okay, well, let's form a plan then. So the problem is you have this trigger, and in the future, how do we deal with that trigger? So in other words, you learn from it, you gain some wisdom, and that's just the way it is. So as they say in yellow here, this is not exactly a direct quote, but it's a concept that I'm sure many of you have heard before. As they say, if you continue to make the same mistake over and over again, but you expect a different result next time, that's the definition of crazy. So for instance, if I beat my head against a brick wall and it hurts, and then I beat my head against a brick wall and it hurts, and then before I do it a third time, I'm like, okay, well, this time the wall is going to break and it won't hurt. And then you beat your head against the wall and you get the same result. It hurts and nothing happens to the wall. That's the definition of crazy. And unfortunately, a lot of times, whether it's adolescents who continue to self-sabotage or engage in delinquent behavior, aggressive behavior, or whether it's individuals, again, in a substance abuse group, relapse prevention group, maybe they continue to use even though there's really no benefit to them, but they keep doing it. This is why the foundational topics exist, to try to work through that. So apply this to Mr. E's modified cognitive triangle. The only thing I did at the bottom was I added where in session 2, I had added responsibility and freedom. And again, I oriented it this way. When you have rational behavior, that tends to be responsible behavior. When you have irrational behavior, that tends to be just doing what you want, impulsive, just, taking your freedom. So what I added to it is the stuff from today's lesson. So responsibility typically means that it's an unfair thing that you have to do. Unfortunately, it's not fair to you, but you kind of have to. But it saves your time, and thus it saves your life. There's less payment that you're paying out. And of course, in this case, your life is the payment, as well as whatever negative consequences you're having to do. But you have less of a payment with responsible behavior. And of course, that's called delayed gratification. That's telling yourself no. Now, if we come over here to the freedom path under irrational behavior, that's oftentimes the fair thing to do. Well, I should be able to do that. Billy Bob did it. I should be able to do it too. Billy Bob smokes crack every day. I should be able to smoke crack every day, right? So the problem is, no, you can't do that, because then you end up wasting your time, and thus you waste your life. There's a higher payment. You're going to pay out of your time in your life more, as well as, of course, negative consequences that come along by just doing what you want. And of course, what we call that instant gratification. And essentially, you're telling yourself yes instead of telling yourself no. So the responsibility path really is self-control. You're controlling yourself, which means that you're independent. You can't be independent and not have self-control. Whereas under the freedom path, you really have no self-control. You're just doing whatever you want. And in the long run, you will not be independent. In fact, you will be dependent. I guarantee it. There's no way around it, because someone is going to have to take care of the responsibilities that you're not taking care of. And when that occurs, that person will tell you what to do. So therefore, you're not going to be independent. So as far as how these things apply, when you're looking at thinking, feelings, and behavior, A, B, C at the top, these are the 3 foundational sessions that we've had. So session 1 is thinking, feelings, and behavior. Session 2 was freedom and responsibility. And of course, today, C right here, session 3 is life equals time. So applications, this is pretty simple. All of these things apply very well to behavioral management, especially with children. Anger management groups in classes. I've done anger management groups with adolescents in group homes. I've done anger management groups in some county jails where I volunteered with grown adults and females, and it works very well. The application, it fits right in. And then, of course, in the past, when I taught an IOP, intensive outpatient alcohol and drug class, this stuff was some of the first stuff I talked about was these foundational topics. So it fits really, really well. But anyway, that's pretty much the end of our of the session for today. The main thing I want you to take away from today is just life equals time. Whatever you spend your time doing, you're spending your life doing. So anyway, guys, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, comment, email me at therapywithmre@yahoo.com. Give me some ideas, give me some feedback. Up to this point, this is the 3rd video that I've done. And my first 2 videos really didn't have any kind of feedback. I haven't gotten any emails, any ideas, but guys, if you have something, that's what I'm here for. I'm just trying to provide free psychoeducational therapeutic information for people that need help. And I mean, if you guys have anything you want me to address, I don't care what it is, let me know and I can certainly bring it up. But give me a little bit of love out there, guys. I'm trying. I mean, this is just, I'm doing this for free. It's just in whatever time I can squeeze in to do it. But anyway, let me know, guys. Just, hit that like button. And I mean, I guess the more feedback I get, the quicker I'll do videos. But anyway, I'm still going to plan to do about one every week or two. The next one will more than likely be on different types of thinking, specifically rational and irrational. Anyway, guys, I appreciate you. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.